4 generations of the iPhone Pro Max flagship devices from Apple. What has been the progression when it comes to battery life? Well, let's find out in this extreme battery drain test between the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the 15 Pro Max, the 14 Pro Max, and 13 Pro Max on mobile data only with no Wi-Fi option. Let's get into it. Okay, no time wasting, let's get straight into this with this extreme battery drain test between the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the 15 Pro Max, the 14 Pro Max, and 13 Pro Max. Now, quick shout out to the kind folks at Vodafone UK for supplying both the iPhone 13 Pro Max and 14 Pro Max for this generational battery drain comparison. There will be links in the description below for where you can get all the latest deals on Vodafone UK with these devices, and a big shout out to them because without them, I would not be able to get this done. Now, the most important thing you need to realize is that we are doing this on mobile data only with no Wi-Fi option, and we do it as one continuous short video with no stops, and we only speed it up in the areas that matter so you don't have to sit around for ages like I had to. If you don't believe me, we actually did this as one continuous live stream, which I will have linked in the description below. So if you appreciate the effort that's gone into doing this, then be sure to like, subscribe, and turn the notification so you don't miss any future videos on the Lover of Tech channel, especially when it comes to extreme battery drain test. Road to 100k subscribers is still on the table, but at least let's try and do that as soon as possible. If not, mid-2025 would be great. And of course, I will go through the exact parameters of how I've set up this extreme battery drain test at the end afterwards, with the most important parameter, the battery health. So stay tuned for that. I will let you know. Now, the first application that we're going to be running through on mobile data is going to be an hour of TikTok. And I always say TikTok is like the wicked wild west when it comes to consuming and also watching vertical content. So if you want to follow us there for more vertical related tech content at Lover of Tech, be sure to follow us at Lover of Tech _BA. No, actually, it's Lover of Tech BA. Underscore is on the Instagram. First interval, 95% battery, 32.7 degrees Celsius, minus 5% battery loss on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. On the 15 Pro Max is 87% battery, 34.9 degrees Celsius, minus 11% battery loss. And then on the 14 Pro Max is 93% battery, 33.2 degrees Celsius, minus 7% battery loss. And the 13 Pro Max is 91% battery, 34.2 degrees Celsius, minus 9% battery loss. So yes, on this one, the most efficient is the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and then followed by the 14 Pro Max, then the 13 Pro Max, and then the 15 Pro Max in terms of battery loss. Of course, that doesn't necessarily translate to the milliamps loss, but for percentage reasons, it is something that you have to consider when it comes to the most efficient one, which is the 16 Pro Max. Now, the next interval is going to be an hour of Instagram Reels. Now, Instagram is actually a very intensive application when it comes to battery drain overall. So we're gonna pretty much be looking through and seeing what we're getting here when it comes to the experience. Now, Instagram, this has pretty much become one of my favorite social media applications when it comes to consuming and producing, from things like collaborative posts, all the reels and memes, being able to comment in GIFs, keeping up with friends and family, and the most important thing, behind the scenes. It's the best way to actually see what we're getting up to at Lover of Tech. So if you want to see behind the scenes of what we're getting up to when it comes to product launches, press trips, and more, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Lover of Tech _BA. Now, after this interval, it's 83% battery, 32.0 degrees Celsius, minus 12% battery loss on iPhone 16 Pro Max, 74% battery, 34.5 degrees Celsius, minus 15% battery loss on 15 Pro Max, 79% battery, 33.8 degrees Celsius, minus 14% battery loss on 14 Pro Max, and then 76% battery, 33.5 degrees Celsius, minus 15% battery loss on the 13 Pro Max. Whoa. Now things are going to be very interesting because we're going to be shifting into an hour of Instagram Live. This is probably by historic reason from how many battery drain tests that we've done in 2024, one of the hardest parts of the extreme battery drain test as we are going through it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and pans out for these devices. Is there going to be some surprise switcheroos as we're going through? It's going to be a very interesting one for sure. Now, when we get to the hour interval at the 3-hour mark, where will we be when it comes to the battery? Let's read it through. 64% battery, 38.6 degrees Celsius, minus 19% battery loss on the 16 Pro Max. And then 58% battery, 36.3 degrees Celsius, minus 16% battery loss on the 15 Pro Max. 60% battery, 37.8 degrees Celsius, minus 19% battery loss on the 14 Pro Max, and then 58% battery, 36.5 degrees Celsius, minus 18% battery loss on the 13 Pro Max. Now, when we look at the efficiency run, it looks like it was actually the 15 Pro Max that was the most efficient, then the 13 Pro Max, and then tied in terms of battery loss, the 14 Pro Max and the 16 Pro Max. But overall percentage-wise, the 16 Pro Max is ahead, 15 and 13 Pro Max are tied, and then we've got the 14 Pro Max there. Now, the next interval is 1 hour of YouTube. And this is pretty much the definitive camera comparison with the S24 Ultra when it first came out this year. And it's very interesting because this is 1440p 60 FPS buffering and streaming on mobile data. And this is the part that works the modem the most. And of course, it's a full screen experience. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. At this intervals, now 51% battery, 32.7 degrees Celsius, minus 13% battery loss on the 16 Pro Max. And there's 41% battery, 34.5 degrees Celsius, minus 17% battery loss on the 15 Pro Max. And then 44% battery, 33.8 degrees Celsius, minus 16% battery loss on the 14 Pro Max. And then 42% battery, 33.5 degrees Celsius, minus 16% battery loss on the 13 Pro Max. Now, this is very interesting how it's shaping up. Now, next is an hour of YouTube music. Now, of course, I use YouTube music because I've got YouTube Premium and it comes included. So I do get an ad-free experience and offline listening when it comes to watching my YouTube videos as well as YouTube music. So I don't use Spotify in that sense. And this is definitively one of my favorite rap albums of all time. Kanye West's College Dropout. This really helps me get through when it comes to these battery drain tests. After almost 4-5 hours, it's the boost I need. So getting through this, how will we be when it comes to this interval? So 36% battery, 33.1 degrees Celsius, minus 15% battery loss on the 16 Pro Max. 23% battery, 35.5 degrees Celsius, minus 18% battery loss on the 15 Pro Max. Ooh. 26% battery, 34.6 degrees Celsius, minus 18% battery loss on a 14 Pro Max. And then 25% battery, 34.0 degrees Celsius, minus 17% battery loss on the 13 Pro Max. So it's 16 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max, and tied in efficiency for battery loss is the 15 and the 14 Pro Max. So this is going to be interesting. Next is going to be an hour of X Spaces or Twitter Spaces. Which one are you? Are you old school with Twitter or new school with X? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, this is kind of like a chat room service where you can create it and engage with fellow content creators, buddies, followers, and just talk about the topics that you want to. In my case, it's of course going to be around technology and what's happening and content creation. So it's something I do on a regular basis. And this actually is a great way to engage, especially when it comes to chatting via voice. After an hour of this, it's 28% battery, 29.2 degrees Celsius, minus 8% battery loss on the 16 Pro Max. Then 15% battery, 30.3 degrees Celsius, minus 8% battery loss on the 15 Pro Max. 18% battery, 30.8 degrees Celsius, minus 8% battery loss on the 14 Pro Max, and then 17% battery, 30.2 degrees Celsius, minus 8% battery loss on the 13 Pro Max. Now, things are very close when it comes to the 15, 14, and 13 Pro Max. We get to an hour of 4K 60 FPS recording on the main rear cameras on these devices. And this is where things are going to get really heated and interesting to see how they play out. Now, after 15 minutes, what we have here is 24% battery on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, 33.6 degrees Celsius, and then 10% battery on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and that is 36.3 degrees Celsius, 11% battery on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, 36.3 degrees Celsius, and then 11% battery on the iPhone 13 Pro Max with a temperature reading of 34.8 degrees Celsius. Things are really close when it comes to the 15, 14, and 13 Pro Max. Now, what is it going to be when we go to the next interval? After 15 minutes, we're judging it to see how things will change across all of them. Now, the 16 Pro Max looks to be cool. 19% battery, 34.7 degrees Celsius. And then at the 6.5 hour mark, we've got 4% battery on the 15 Pro Max, 37.8 degrees Celsius, and then 5% battery on a 14 Pro Max, 38.4 degrees Celsius, and then 6% battery, and then 35.9 degrees Celsius on the 13 Pro Max. Boy, it looks like the 13 Pro Max is just done a switcheroo and it's pulling ahead. Is it going to beat the 14 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max? Now, the 13 Pro Max has had legendary battery life, but this is the first time I'm testing it, and we're going to see how things play out. Now, when it comes to how things are looking, we get to the 6 hour 35-minute mark, and then it's 18% battery, 34.6 degrees Celsius on a 16 Pro Max. Now 2% battery left on the 15 Pro Max, 4% battery left on a 14 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max is on 5% battery. Now the temperature reading on the 15 Pro Max is 38.3 degrees Celsius, 14 Pro Max is 38.3 degrees Celsius as well, and then the 13 Pro Max is 36.2 degrees Celsius. It looks like the 13 Pro Max is going to cause a huge upset compared to the 14 and the 15 Pro Max, but the 16 Pro Max is cruising. Now, which one is going to give in first? It's going to be very interesting to see. Is there going to be any surprises, or is it what we're predicting with the 15 Pro Max? How things are in 4K video recording, and it is first to go. 6 hours, 39 minutes and 52 seconds, a final temperature reading of 38.8 degrees Celsius. In fourth place is the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now that is a pleasant surprise when it comes to 4K recording, and we're looking at the temperature reading across the board for the others. We've got 16% battery on the 16 Pro Max at 6 hours and 40 minutes, and then we've got 2% battery on the 14 Pro Max and 4% battery on the 13 Pro Max. Boy, things are going to be cruising through now. Let's see which one is going to be given in first, and it does look like it's the 14 Pro Max. Finishing time of 6 hours, 44 minutes and 33 seconds. A final temperature reading of 39.3 degrees Celsius. In third place is the 14 Pro Max. Okay, so only 5-minute difference roughly compared to the 15 Pro Max. And it looks like things are cruising. 6 hours and 45 minutes, 15% battery on the 16 Pro Max, 36.1 degrees Celsius. And then on the 13 Pro Max, we've got 3% battery left now, 37.3 degrees Celsius, minus 9% battery loss. We're doing this right now, and it's just so interesting to me to see how well the 13 Pro Max has held up. As we're pretty much cruising through, which one is going to be next to go? It is going to be the 13 Pro Max, but now it's on its final 1%, and it's on 37.0 degrees Celsius. This is at the 6 hours and 50-minute mark, and then 14% battery, 35.8 degrees Celsius on the 16 Pro Max. As things are cruising through, I'm now rooting for this 13 Pro Max to do a whole hour of 4K video recording, but it does pack it in at exactly 6 hours, 51 minutes and 0 seconds. A final temperature reading of 37.3 degrees Celsius. In second place is the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So yeah, we know how things are. This is the second extreme battery drain test that we've done on the 16 Pro Max. We get to the 1 hour mark for 7 hours. It's on 11% battery, 36.2 degrees Celsius. And this is a very interesting outing for how things have been with the 16 Pro Max. So it does make it to the gaming test with Asphalt Unite at a high settings, as we're pretty much going through. At the 7 hour and 15-minute mark, we're going to test how far it's going when it comes to the battery. It's our 4% battery, 37.0 degrees Celsius. Now let's look at the next interval, which should be 15 minutes later at 7.5 hours. And then it's on 1% battery, 35.7 degrees Celsius. Now, how long is it going to be able to hold on to that last 1%? We know iPhones are stubborn when it comes to that. And this is the level of efficiency that is being great on a 16 Pro Max so far. And as we're pretty much going through, where is it going to finish up when it comes to this extreme battery drain test? And it's on the last 1%. And it does finish at 7 hours, 33 minutes and 6 seconds. A final temperature reading of 35.8 degrees Celsius. In first place is the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So in fourth place is the iPhone 15 Pro Max with a finishing time of 6 hours, 39 minutes and 52 seconds. So yeah, this is a surprise one. We've done many extreme battery drain tests with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and this is pretty much around the ballpoint that we usually get. So this seems accurate. Yeah, fourth place, iPhone 15 Pro Max, finishing time 6 hours, 39 minutes and 52 seconds. So in third place is the iPhone 14 Pro Max with a finishing time of 6 hours, 44 minutes and 33 seconds. So not far off from what we got on the 15 Pro Max, but it is technically a previous generation device beating the newer generation device. So this is an upset and an interesting one, but this is what we got with the 14 Pro Max in third place with a finishing time of 6 hours, 44 minutes and 33 seconds. And in second place with a huge upset compared to what we had on the 15 Pro Max and the 14 Pro Max is the iPhone 13 Pro Max with a finishing time of 6 hours, 51 minutes and 0 seconds. Now, this is the first time testing this with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and what a pleasant surprise. At one point, I was rooting for it to be able to actually get through a whole hour of 4K 60 recording, but alas, it did finish in second place with a finishing time of 6 hours, 51 minutes, and 0 seconds. And in first place, and the winner of this extreme battery drain test on mobile data only with no Wi-Fi option, the iPhone 16 Pro Max with a finishing time of 7 hours, 33 minutes, and 6 seconds. Now, of course, this is slightly less than the 7 hours and 47 minutes that we got in the first extreme battery drain test, but nonetheless, considering the battery capacity that is packing, the efficiency of the new chip, and the optimization of iOS, this is still a great result and definitively the biggest generational leap that we've seen in iPhone battery life, arguably since the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So again, this is a great result, and we have this in first place, the 16 Pro Max, a finishing time of 7 hours, 33 minutes, and 6 seconds. Now the moment of truth. What were the exact parameters used for this extreme battery drain test? Now, the main thing that we stated is our extreme battery drain tests are done on mobile data only with no Wi-Fi option. This is actually carried out on Vodafone's 4G network on prepaid, and all of them are on the same 21 gigabyte data plan. So that helps there when it comes to how we are running it on mobile data. Next is the most important one, the battery health status on all these devices. Now, starting with the 16 Pro Max, this is the latest device, so it is on 100%, and it does state that the charge cycle counts is only 7. Next is the 15 Pro Max. It's also on 100% battery health, and it has only gone through 21 charge cycles. Now, the 14 Pro Max, it's also on 100% battery health. It doesn't state the charge cycles, but this is also the same for the 13 Pro Max. It's also on 100% battery health. It does not state the charge cycles. So yeah, big shout out to the guys over at Vodafone UK. They supplied both these devices with 100% battery health. So this made this test as fair as possible. Now, at the time of doing this extreme battery drain test and recording it, and with the live stream that we did to accompany it, this was on the 6th of October 2024. So the software available at that time was iOS 18.0.1 across all these devices. Now, for the display brightness calibration, we have disabled any form of auto brightness feature, adaptive brightness feature on all the iPhones, and with a clear white background, we have tried to calibrate the display as close to 200 nits as possible. And a final one, a quick snapshot of the Geekbench 6 scores across these devices, so you can see in terms of the performance parameters what we're working with from the 13 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, 15 Pro Max, up to the latest iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, a quick friendly reminder rundown of the specs, starting with the iPhone 16 Pro Max. It is powered by the Apple A18 Pro chipset. It's packing 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it is using a 4,685 milliamp hour battery. For the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it is packing Apple's A17 Pro chipset with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it is packing approximately a 4,441 milliamp hour battery. For the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it is packing Apple's A16 Bionic chipset with 6 gigabytes of RAM, and it's packing a 4,323 milliamp hour battery. And for the iPhone 13 Pro Max, it is packing Apple's A15 Bionic chipset with 6 gigabytes of RAM, and it's packing a 4,352 milliamp hour battery. Now that is it with this extreme battery drain test on mobile data only with no Wi-Fi option on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, 15 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, and the 13 Pro Max. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Was this a big surprise to you, or is this exactly what you were expecting? Let me know. That's it for me, Ben from Lover of Tech. If you enjoy videos like this, you know exactly what to do. Hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you're part of Team TLS, the Tech Lover Squad, so you don't miss any future videos on the channel. I hope you're all safe during this time. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.